Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sunday Matinee. I'm your host, Ben Stahl. This is episode 47, and we've got a lot to talk about today. But first, I need to introduce this week's panel. Returning once again is Andrea Gordon. Hello, Andrea.
Hi.
And joining us, for the very first time ever is Sean Rabel. Sean, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thanks.
All right, so we're going to kick things off, as always, with some news bites. So, yeah, Star Wars Celebration has been going on these past few days, and I'm just going to throw out some highlights from that. They keep dropping news bits like every 20 minutes. Twitter is a nightmare for Star Wars right now. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to leave us with two of the biggest things that have come out because they're coming fairly soon. We got our first trailer for Andor, which is, of course, the prequel series following Diego Luna's character from Rogue One, which I'm very excited about because Rogue One was awesome. And that is going to drop on Disney Plus on August 31st. And they also have announced what everyone's been waiting for. The Mandalorian Season 3 is returning in February of 2023, just in time for my birthday. Huzzah.
Nice.
So,
did they
what
say
do we think?
Anything about the casting on that? Because I know that
they showed stuff, but it has not been made public yet. So,
okay.
If you see anything on Mandalorian, it's gonna look super grainy, filmed on a phone. I think they're trying to keep that stuff under wraps. But Andor's coming out fairly soon, so I think they really want to get people hyped up for that. I assume we're excited about, at the very least, about the Mandalorian, because who's not?
I appreciate the Mandalorian. I am highly ambivalent in this age about Star Wars in general, just to put that out there. I did see the trailer for Andor, and something that has not disappointed me whatsoever in the recent years with Star Wars is their art department. They continue to knock it out of the park with character design, wardrobe, makeup, set design. The ideas coming out of people's minds for stuff that looks cool is definitely top par. The story is wearing thin, and there are some things that they're hammering for audience recognition. It's like, oh, that would be cool. And I'm fine with Diego Luna come back. Is that the right name?
Yep.
Okay. He had an awesome character. He's an awesome actor. Good to see him. Something that has happened again and again in recent years is this is a galaxy we're talking about, and they keep going back to the same planets. That kind of makes sense in a little bit with Tatooine, just because you got roots there that you keep coming back to. But Andor was known for having a moon with a shield generator base.
And Andor is not the name of the planet. Andor is his name. He's Cassian Andor.
Oh, my bad. In that case, tangent solved. We're coming back.
Yeah. I mean, they could end up going to Endor. It's Star Wars, It's
Endor.
How they tend to roll. But from what I've seen in the trailer, it looks like they're going to be exploring some new places, and I'm very happy for that because
okay.
Because I got burned out during Boba Fett on Tatooine. I think a lot of people did.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cool setting. That's some things that are prime ingredients for Star Wars. Something that didn't really click into my head until I saw an interview with Mark Hamill, sorry, referring to the story having this old wizard, referring to Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's like, wizard, that's not right. He was a Jedi. So, oh wait, wizard. Okay, that completes the ingredients. You have kind of a Western with magic and laser guns. The ingredients for Star Wars are so awesome that you can do so many things with it, and it clicks. So we'll see how it rolls, though.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to both because I think The Mandalorian's been so far one of the best things they've done in recent years.
Creators that really care a lot about the legacy of it and this ongoing story, which I really appreciate.
So also coming out of Lucasfilm, not necessarily Star Wars, but Lucasfilm this week. We got our first look at Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones 5, which I'm excited for it. I'm glad that Lucas is nowhere near it to, do what he loves to do with his modern movies and throw copious amounts of CG where it need not be. I'm excited for James Mangold directing it because he handled the last two Wolverine movies with just near perfection. 3:10 to Yuma is a great film. So I'm excited to see where he's going to take the character, and I'm excited for Mads Mikkelsen in there as, I'm going to assume, the villain, because it's just what he does.
He has range. What are you talking about?
Except Rogue One, he was not a villain.
Oh.
That's right. That's right. And he was such a good character in that too. But I'm excited for that. Still got about another year before Indiana Jones 5. But 2023 is looking to be pretty cool for the movies and the TV
series.
Yeah, they also dropped that. Yeah, the trailer for the Willow series is coming in November. So Lucasfilm is finally digging into their non-Star Wars stuff for Disney Plus, and I really appreciate that as well. That should be a lot of fun. Finally, what is got to be the most amazing, ridiculous thing to come out of the news this week. The beloved children's character Winnie the Pooh has entered the public domain, and as such, there is now a horror adaptation of the character in the works titled Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey.
Finally.
And yeah, we've all been waiting. And the images that they have gone out are genuinely disturbing.
Suitably creepy. Yeah.
It's this is not your childhood memories come back to life. It is something far, far more sinister. And I, for one, am just excited to see whether or not this is going to be like genuinely one of the all-time great horror adaptations, or if it's going to be a dumpster fire, because it could go either way with how it looks. It's just so weird.
And either could be entertaining and successful, really.
Yeah. I have nothing else to say. It's just amazing. So the last bit of the news for the week is I've been starting to do a box office update. So what happened at the box office this weekend? Well, I've got the numbers, the estimated numbers for the 4-day Memorial Day holiday weekend. Surprise, surprise, Top Gun Maverick is on top with an estimated $151 million for its opening weekend, finally knocking Doctor Strange out of the top spot. But Doctor Strange is estimated to bring in $21 million for the 4-day weekend. And the important thing about that is, way back in my Doctor Strange preview episode, I had predicted that Doctor Strange would not surpass The Batman at the domestic box office. If these numbers hold true, it will be at $375 million for its domestic total, exceeding The Batman by $6 million. I didn't think it was going to happen because The Batman had way less competition for its long run at the top. But yeah, that's Marvel for you. Also,
you gotta say something for Marvel momentum. Just people continuing with the saga. Yeah.
I also had predicted that because when I saw the Batman was so good, and I was very nervous that Doctor Strange wouldn't be. And as I had predicted, for me personally, it was not. It's a very fine film, but it's not going to be a classic. Opening at number 3 is the Bob's Burgers movie, which I'm actually surprised didn't open higher given how popular that show is. Downton Abbey dropped to 4th place. The Bad Guys at 5th. My personal favorite film of the year, Everything Everywhere All at Once, is holding its own at 6th place once again. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, 7th place. The Lost City at 8th. Surprising to still see it in the top 10, considering it's been in theaters since early April. Holding up very well. Alex Garland's Men dropping down to 9th. And at number 10, I do not even recognize this title, F3 Fun and Frustration, whatever the heck that is. So, yeah, that's the box office for the week. I was wrong about Doctor Strange. That's Marvel for you. And apparently also Top Gun is Tom Cruise's highest grossing opening weekend ever, which also surprises me given that the Mission Impossible films are ludicrously popular, and I don't know how those hadn't been his biggest films yet, because frankly, I think those are his best films.
You could say that Top Gun Maverick was not in the danger zone. Thank you for
That was a
the pity
secure
laugh,
bet.
Sean.
Yeah.
Geez. This is why I have Andrea on the show.
That's the reason, yes.
Yep. So next up, I wanted to give a little shout out to another podcast out there called Rewind 2552. It's hosted by my friend Adam St. John. 2 years ago, he had me on his show 1001 by 1. We talked about Jurassic Park, and that was kind of the thing that kicked into gear this whole idea of, hey, I could do a video show. So thank you, Adam, for that, and thank you for having me on your show 2552, 2 years later, to talk about The Lost World. So if you like this show, you like hearing about movies, check out Rewind 2552. Adam is going back through every opening weekend from 25 years ago, so looking at the year 1997 and looking at the highest grossing new film of every weekend for the whole year. So Lost World, it was fun. It was fun to reminisce about the 90s, back when I was somehow still ridiculously tall, but much younger.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So before we get on to our main topic of the day, what have we been watching this week? Well, I'll start it off. Surprise, surprise, I watched the first 2 episodes of Obi-Wan Kenobi. I am delighted thus far. If it holds up, it could be my favorite Star Wars show on Disney+. And it actually opens up with a recap of the prequel trilogy, which somehow, with the magic of editing, makes the prequel trilogy look good. So that may be the biggest miracle that they've pulled off with this series. But there's 4 episodes to go. And then last night, I started Stranger Things. We'll be talking about that show later on another episode. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. I've been disappointed with Stranger Things 2 and 3. If 4 leans a lot more into the horror elements than the last 2 seasons did, I might be pleasantly surprised. But they're already doing the same thing that they did with seasons 2 and 3 by introducing characters that I hate, which means those are characters that are probably going to die later.
Does that add to the satisfaction or the misery?
To the misery. I'm tired of them. I'm tired of them introducing like characters that you just hate, and are like, oh, you can just guess it, like Billy in season 2, how he has everyone caught up or care about Stranger Things.
You can go
Haven't
ahead.
watched it yet.
Okay.
They introduce a character in season 2 who dies in season 3, and it's like, it's pretty predictable with their arc. So I'll just leave it at that. Sean, have you been watching anything awesome or worth noting this week?
I actually contributed to the box office with both Top Gun and Doctor Strange. I hadn't gotten to them yet. So Top Gun, no spoilers, it was fun. It was definitely a throwback, but they pulled it off. One thing that surprised me in the first moments, I was kind of thinking before the movie started, it's an iconic movie, the first one, and it also had an iconic soundtrack. And I was thinking of things that could be carried forward. And of course, there's the instrumental na 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 with the bells and stuff like that. It really sets a dramatic tone. It's like, yeah, I could see that coming forward, but Highway to the Danger Zone, Kenny Loggins, I don't know. But sure enough, they did both. So yeah, that. Let's see. I've I sometimes check out anime, and one of the titles that keeps coming up from people saying, hey, this is something to check out, is Mob Psycho 100. Very weird title, kind of a weird show, but it really works out. The animation style is kind of crude. It follows the manga style a little bit much for some, but it works for what it is. It's basically this awkward teenager who has these outrageous psychic powers, who's kind of taken advantage of by his part-time employer who has no powers whatsoever, but is kind of a psychic ripoff guy, but also is very conscientious in giving people their money's worth, even if it's a relaxing massage or whatever. And some of the things that really pop off with the story is not only these adventures, but almost all the characters are really well-meaning and just good people with just bizarre things happening around them. So it's rewarding. I would recommend it.
I'll keep that in mind. Anime is not really my thing, but every now and then someone will drop something on me that sounds interesting.
We all have just so much bandwidth. So,
Andrea, have you been watching anything fun this week?
Not really. I'm just rewatching old shows because I like to have it on in the background while I do other things. But the one I just finished was Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So I just finished rewatching Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and it's still my favorite show. So nothing changed there. I don't think I can relate to a character more than I relate to Jake Peralta. So that's pretty good.
Solving crimes every day, right?
Just the personality, not the crime solving, but yes. If you follow me on Twitter, which I think Ben does, I did watch Jungle Cruise for the 105th time. Other than that, nope, nothing new. I've started. I have to be in the mood to watch a new show because I have to sit and watch it rather than just dink around and do things. So that's the hard part for me, is just sitting around and making a commitment and watching it. I think the last show that I watched that was new was Mandalorian. So I still need to get on it and watch Boba Fett and Stranger Things. So I'll get there, but that's what I'm doing right now.
Well, you're, despite the fact that it's been a year now, I think you're further than me on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I still haven't finished my first watch of it. I'm still on the last season. I think I'm just not ready to let go.
The last season's hard to watch because it's not as good as the other seasons. But the last episode is good. But the last season is just kind of But
I haven't finished it, but I'm at the point where it would pay off to start back at the beginning to watch the whole thing through, and instead of just trying to figure out where I left off and trying to enjoy it that way, because it is a good series.
Noise. Cool.
Yeah, it's just, I think after Parks and Rec and Community, I'm just not ready to be done with a sitcom that I'm so attached to, because they come along once a decade for me. I don't get into them. So they've got to have that sort of weird, kooky style to them that those three shows have had. So,
and characters can really get attached too, I think.
Yeah.
It really helps.
All right. So that is what we've been watching this week. It's time to move on to the real meat and potatoes of what we're talking about today. So let's go back to August 2010. Summer moviegoers have already been treated to Iron Man 2, Despicable Me, Inception, Prince of Persia, The Last Airbender, and Shrek Forever After. What a lineup of good and terrible films that is. But August was still to come, and this is 2010. This is before Guardians of the Galaxy proved that August can be a month to drop good movies. And August, for most moviegoers, was still a time to just go see the dumping ground films, the second-tier summer films. And the weekend of August 13th saw two films opening nationwide: The Expendables and Scott Pilgrim versus the World. One would go on to hit 100 million at the domestic box office and receive two sequels. The other would go widely unnoticed around the world, but for those who saw it, it would go on to become a treasured classic. Praised by such esteemed industry veterans as Guillermo del Toro, it would find an audience on home video and streaming platforms and see its reputation grow over the years, so much so that it would be re-released in theaters for its 10th anniversary. And by that I mean its 11th anniversary, because COVID. And yes, that beloved classic is, of course, Scott Pilgrim versus the World. So before we get into our thoughts about Scott Pilgrim, a quick breakdown for those who may have forgotten what it's about over the years. Though if you're watching this episode, I hope you're a big fan. And if you haven't seen it, get out there and watch it. It is truly one of the best films of its decade. All right, so the IMDb plot synopsis of Scott Pilgrim reads, in a magically realistic version of Toronto, a young man must defeat his new girlfriend's 7 evil exes one by one in order to win her heart. Which is a very, very simple look at what the film is. But I think that's good enough to hook people who haven't seen it yet. It is, of course, directed by the great Edgar Wright. And I'm going to list off a ton of actors here because, quite frankly, I think that almost every character in this film is worth mentioning. There's only a small handful that you can brush over. But this film stars Michael Cera as Scott, Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Ramona Flowers, Kieran Culkin as Wallace Wells, Anna Kendrick as Stacy Pilgrim, Ellen Wong as Knives Chow, Mark Webber as Stephen Stills, Allison Pill as Kim Pine, Johnny Simmons as Young Neil, Aubrey Plaza as Julie, Satya Baba as Matthew Patel, Chris Evans as Lucas Lee, Brie Larson as Envy Adams, Brandon Ruth as Todd Ingram, Mae Whitman as Roxy Richter, Ketya Sato as Kyle Katianagi, Shota Saito as Ken Katianagi, and Jason Schwartzman as Gideon Graves. What a lineup right there. What an incredible cast. And just crazy to see a bunch of people on here who were just about to get some of their big breakout roles. This is right before Parks and Rec, so Aubrey Plaza is basically playing herself, but I mean, come on, so many great actors show up in this one. And it's also really crazy to see just how many of these actors either had appeared or will appear in a Marvel or DC film. And I think it's also worth noting the director of photography, Bill Pope, because the cinematography in this film is incredible, and stunt coordinator Brad Allen, because the fight scenes in this are some of the best you'll ever see in an action film. So my first question for the panel is, since it's been almost 12 years since the film debuted, do you remember where you were when you first saw Scott Pilgrim, and what were your initial reactions when you saw it for the first time? Sean, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Local Cineplex that was depressingly not that full, and I loved it. To this day, it's one of my favorite films.
Andrea, do you remember where you were when you first saw Scott Pilgrim?
I was at the Lacey Cinemas, and I believe I was by myself because I don't think any of my friends wanted to see it with me, but it was my first year of college or going in my second year of college at community college. And I walked in with low expectations. It looked like, I was like, oh, it's a comic book movie. And I liked those when I was in college too. And then I sat through it. Immediately when it was over, I IM'd my friends because I didn't have a cell phone yet. And I said, hey, we kind of need to see this movie. So then my friend saw it the next weekend with me. And then immediately when it was over, she says to me, well, we need to see that again. So I've ended up seeing it 3 or 4 times in theaters before, even after the second weekend or something like that. So, and I need to be an asshole, Ben, and correct you on one thing, if I may.
Sure.
Brandon is his last name is pronounced Ralph, rhymes with South.
Okay. That's right. I've heard it pronounced both ways. It's been pronounced differently on the documentary.
Yeah, I only know that because it was back when I saw him in Superman, and I thought he was really cute, which he still is. But they asked him how his name is pronounced, and he said, usually it's pronounced, the way I like to pronounce it is it rhymes with South. So there's that. And that's just me being
I'm sorry, Brandon Routh, if you're watching this.
So I'm sorry for being an asshole, Ben, but I just had to point that out.
Nope, that's fair play. Where was I when I saw this? So it was my last night living in Bellingham. And I wanted to go see this movie really badly. So I went, sort of like my last night celebration, I went out to the Ranch Room in Bellingham for a few drinks. And my roommate and I went and saw Scott Pilgrim. And I was just enthralled with it. I was already excited to see it because Edgar Wright. And I just fell in love with all the video game references, the pitch perfect comedic timing of the film. And again, just Edgar Wright's signature style of filmmaking to the max in this movie. And then I came back to South King County, and it was like the first movie I told my dad. I was like, Dad, we have to go see this movie right now, because I had already been following up, and I was like, ooh, this did not have a good opening weekend, and it's probably not going to be in theaters long. So we need to go. He needed to see Inception as well, but I said, Dad, Inception can wait. It's made $200 million. We need to go see this movie right now. And my dad loved it. And it was fun because my dad wasn't like a gamer the way I was, but he played GoldenEye and Perfect Dark a lot. And he lived through the era of me discovering The Legend of Zelda. So he got to hear all of the Zelda theme songs and whatnot over the years. So he recognized a lot of what was going on, which was really fun. And that's why my mom will never appreciate it, because she doesn't get that kind of stuff. So that was my first experience with it. It was amazing. And I only saw it twice in the movie theater. But, yeah, that's just how it worked. So
did you guys watch the reunion special on YouTube?
I did.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically everybody came back, including Chris Evans.
Yeah, they didn't
And
get
they did a
Kieran
script
Culkin
read
though.
through.
I was really upset, but
Yeah.
it happened. Sorry.
It's funny how that, because so much of the greatness of this movie is frankly the way it was portrayed by Edgar Wright. But just the script reading alone, I don't know how much of it was nostalgia, but it still was fun to watch. I don't know.
I saw the first 10 minutes and then I had to leave, but
it
anyway,
may have been
sorry,
because the cast, had such a good experience with it, and they still continue to love the movie.
I didn't get to see the reunion, but I did make it out last year for the 10th anniversary screening. I had to drive all the way up to South Center because nowhere around here where I'm at was playing it. But it was totally worth it to see it once again on the big screen. So technically I've seen it 3 times. So yeah, not bad. So yeah, 2010, it's August. As you both pointed out when you saw it, it was a pretty empty theater. It wasn't terribly packed. I recall when I saw it both times, and even for the 10th anniversary either. Andrea, why do you think this film flew under the radar in 2010?
I don't remember seeing any advertising for it. Like, I remember like a theatrical trailer, and people saw the trailer and was like, I'm not sure what this is. Like, people were confused because, I don't know. It's just, if you don't know anything about Scott Pilgrim, which I didn't when I saw the movie, it just, people don't know how to react to that sort of thing. And I also think people were already sick of Michael Cera at that point. If I remember 2010, Michael Cera was like everywhere, and people were already kind of sick of seeing him everywhere. But I don't know. I don't even remember like seeing TV spots or anything for it. I mean, it was 10 years ago, so maybe it's just my memory's not great, but I don't know. I just I think the lack of advertising maybe, and the fact that people didn't know what kind of movie it was. So I don't know. Sorry, I can't give a better answer, but honestly, that's what I think.
I mean, you're right. It's tough. It was 10 years ago. We can't necessarily peg any specific reason down there. Sean, what do you think?
I think the trailer and the marketing had a lot to do with it. I rewatched the trailer just last night in preparation for this, and it kind of had this upbeat alternative, soundtrack to it that didn't match the movie. And the first half of the trailer was quirky boy meets girl kind of thing. Just it really missed the target. And although it had some fight elements toward the end of it, it still didn't really match up. So I think it failed in that. And I agree with Andrea for a different reason. Michael Cera, I have tons of respect for the guy, love him in so many things. And I would give the casting choice of him a B for this movie. He's totally awesome at the whip crack dialogue and deadpan delivery and so many other things. I think the character as portrayed in the comic is kind of a little bit more popular-ish, where he's not really quirky. He's like a scrappy, doesn't treat people all that well, but if you want to say good looking, whatever. So although I liked him in the movie still, it wasn't until like into his initial fight where I even had an indication that he was going to be a fighter. In the comic, this guy has been fighting since he was 16 years old. It was kind of a big backstory. And I think the combination of that and the lack of a major push that connected with people kind of took a hit for it. And possibly also, it seemed like this had a lot of energy from gaming, that style of gaming, and also kind of a garage band, indie, local club scene feel that may have been 6 to 10 years too late. I'm not saying it was too late, but it just felt a little bit after the major swell of that scene. Kind of like if you released a movie about poker now. It was huge like 15 years ago or something like that. Now it better be a good movie on its own.
For the record, I do like Michael Cera. I was just talking about the general public.
I sensed your disdain and I corrected it.
That you make some good points as well. I've got a couple of theories of my own, and one is definitely yes. I don't remember the advertising for this film. Granted, this was the tail end of college for me. I was living in a house where, to save money, we didn't have cable television, so TV ads weren't a thing for me. I had to rely on the internet, and that was enough for me to get me interested in this film and just Edgar Wright. But looking back at the trailer, I looked at the trailers last night as well, Sean, and they don't do a great job selling the film. They kind of try to make it seem like it's a fairly ordinary type of comedy, and it's not. Mm-hmm. And it's also worth noting, Andrea, you mentioned like you didn't have much knowledge of the character of Scott Pilgrim before you saw the movie, and that's going to be true for most audiences because the original series of graphic novels weren't that old. The first volume released in 2004, and then the final volume released about a month before the movie opened. So his complete story in the graphic novel had just ended right before the movie came out. So it makes sense that these characters aren't going to be widely known the way that, even though general audiences, in 2008 weren't super hyper aware of Iron Man at the very least had 40 plus years of comic books, behind him that they could, that people could look back on. Scott Pilgrim is still very much a new thing in the public eye. Mm-hmm. And Edgar Wright himself, I was super into Edgar Wright. I'll always be into Edgar Wright, but in 2010, he was still kind of a niche director. Like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz are films that we all love, but they actually opened lower than Scott Pilgrim did. but they're also much smaller films, so they don't need to make, Scott Pilgrim I looked it up, the budget was 60 million, which is, for Edgar Wright, his first sort of big Hollywood film. It's huge. So
I would also say that Edgar Wright's former films were more known for Simon Pegg and Nick Frost than the director, even though he did an awesome job on them. It was outweighed in the public perception of it.
Yeah, and this is his first film without those two actors. And to your point, Sean, I think you're right about Michael Cera in the sense that he's great in the roles that he's cast in, but this film, initially felt like it would need a bigger box office draw. And it didn't have that. It didn't have, an actor that you go see and give $100 million to at the box office.
Robert Downey Jr.
It didn't have,
for example.
And it had Chris Evans before Chris Evans was huge.
It's right after he did Fantastic Four too.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Side note, not just action movies and superhero movies, but the amount of comics-based movies that Chris Evans has been in is off the charts.
Yeah, because he did that DC one, right?
Yeah, The Losers, I think it was.
Yeah.
Something like that.
With Zoe Saldana. Yeah.
He's also in Push, which is its own comic. It's not DC.
I didn't know
I didn't see that because that looked like it was just the lowest budget type of straight to video type of movie.
I love that movie, but
it could also be because I had seen a similar one with Hayden Christensen and it was bad.
Jumper.
Can't remember. Yeah, Jumper. Jumper was not good.
You're right. That was bad. Yeah.
There was no Push. No.
Yeah. And my last theory is that this is 2010. Almost all the other movies I listed for those summer box office, like they're sequels or they're based on existing IP. The Last Airbender was more successful at the box office than Scott Pilgrim, and it's terrible. It is one of the worst films I've ever seen, but it was based on an incredibly popular IP, and so that gave it a nice, good initial push. But yeah, everything else except for Inception was a sequel or that kind of thing. And the only reason Inception was huge was because they could tag it with from the director of The Dark Knight, and Leonardo DiCaprio was in it.
Yeah.
Nothing against Inception. It's my second favorite movie of 2010.
There's also something else to say about people only having so much money in their pockets. And that was also hard financial times. So a lot of popular movies that year, maybe people ran out.
Yeah, that is possible. That's right. That was the bubble burst. Forgot about that. Because I was in college and not worried ever about buying a home.
Thanks, Obama. Just kidding.
Yeah. Oh, that was also the era of swine flu. Remember that?
Thanks, Obama.
Yep. All right. So my next question is, have you read the books? And if so, how do they compare? Does the film faithfully recreate the story or major themes? Andrea, have you read the books?
I read the books after I saw the movie. And then I reread them and then watched the movie again. Yes, I have read the books. You want me to go on with the question, I assume?
Go right ahead.
I actually like the movie ending better than the book ending. I don't know if I'm allowed to spoil the books or not.
I haven't read them, but I'm not
talking about them. In the book,
I'm not worried.
In the books, he goes with knives. He ends up with knives in the books, and in the movie, he ends up with Ramona. And I think that's a much better ending than the book's ending. But as you mentioned earlier, Ben, the ending to the books wasn't made until right before the movie came out. So the ending of the books is going to be different than the movie because they didn't have the ending to work with when they were filming the movie. So they worked with what they had. And again, I personally like the movie ending better. And I do like what they kept in the movie, and I kind of like some of the stuff they kept out. A lot of Scott's backstory is like cut out from the movie because I mean a movie can only be so long, and there's 6 books I think in the series, or 7. There's 7 X's, right? So there's 7 books. Anyway,
I think there's only 6 books.
Okay. Anyway, so there, there's 6 books, and a movie is only 90 minutes. So there are some things you don't really need in the movie, and so the stuff they did away with, most of it was fine with me. Like they there's like a whole scene where he talks to his exes from high school, and there's a whole another ex-girlfriend he had before Ramona and Knives, and they have a whole scene in the book where he dates Kim, and I just think none of that was really necessary in the movie. I mean, they touch on it, but that's all you really need because the focus should be on Scott and Ramona and not Scott and his past life. And some of the stuff I wish they left in was, well, the main thing that I remember, because it's been a while since I read the books, but Sean mentioned it actually, was Scott been training for fighting since he was like a kid, and also how Wallace was training Scott when the first fight came. Matthew Patel, trying to remember his name, challenges into a fight, and he says, "Oh, I don't know how to fight," and Wallace says, "I'm going to train you," and they basically have like a whole part of the book where Wallace trains Scott how to fight, and I think that was really cool. There's more fights. Like Envy gets a fight in the book, I think, which is pretty cool. Most of Roxy's fight with Ramona is actually Envy's fight with Ramona, which I think is pretty cool. Again, I don't really think the movie needed it. I think it's fine without it, but I like that they had it in the books. It just kind of gives more depth to Ramona's character as well, and even Envy's character. So, to answer your main question though, I like what they did with the books, and I wish they would have done more at the same time. Basically, when you see a movie based on a book, same kind of thing. And it's hard to make a hour-and-a-half movie out of 6 different books. So I'm satisfied with the final product, and I still like the books, and I still wish they would have done more, but also, very indifferent answer. So I apologize about that, but that's what I think.
That's fine. The author, Brian Lee O'Malley, he's very satisfied with what they did with the film. Mm-hmm. So that's a good thing when the author is happy with the final product. And from what you're saying, I also gather you would not be interested in the Peter Jackson version.
There's a Peter Jackson version?
No, I'm just joking. If there was, it would be 6 movies long.
You're talking about The Hobbit, right? Okay, yeah.
A 6-film saga.
He made 3 movies out of 1 book versus 1 movie out of 6 books. So
yeah. It is worth noting, though, that they did actually film the alternate ending where Scott and Knives end up together.
Yes.
And it is on the deleted scenes. But I even having not read the books, I agree. I prefer that ending. I just feel like I can't speak to the books, but in the movie, Scott and Ramona both feel like they're out of place in the world. And so for them to go off together and find themselves feels like a more appropriate ending than with just getting back with Knives, who I love, and I love the callback to Wallace's line from the beginning, "I'm too cool for you."
Yeah, I was gonna say Knives could do better, so I'm glad that she didn't go back with Scott.
Sean, I take it you've read the books. How do you feel they compare to the film?
I actually have not finished the books. I started and went away and didn't get back to it, but in a way, that kind of shows me that I prefer the movie, but I do appreciate the books and intend to get back to them. A couple of things I think they punched up, and if that time stamp is correct from Andrea, it shocks me that they packed so much into 90 minutes. That does not seem like 90 minutes of content in that movie. It's pretty big.
I mean, the runtime might be longer than that, but
still impressive.
That's how comedies tend to average out.
Fair enough. I do like both of them, and I like a lot of the stuff that Brian Lee O'Malley was able to do and chose to do. I remember he cared so much about setting the vibe for the comic. He actually put in a fingering chart for the guitar part on a song that's in the comic. He put that in so people could actually play it. That's the kind of attention to detail he put into it. But when you're talking about Edgar Wright taking this on with a reasonable budget and just the attention to detail and the care and everything you put into it, it might also weigh in its factor that this is basically a live action comic. I'm not talking about a live action adaptation. On screen, these people are comic characters. You know, they're cartoons. They get busted up into the sky and through walls and stuff like that, and kind of go, okay, let's scrap.
Those are actual scenes from the comic book. Like they have like the picture from that in the comic book, and it's in the movie,
which is wonderful. I mean, the tie-ins. You know, even when Stephen Stills is going through their competition in the Toronto International Battle of the Bands, he's going through this flip chart of, you know, art obviously taken, you know, inspired by O'Malley's work, and saying, yeah, this is our next competition, like you do, of course, when you're prepping for, you know, your band competition. But also the stuff that you could call them Easter eggs, I would just say it goes more than Easter eggs. It's contributions that don't distract, but just add to the movie. Some of their unbelievable, you know, sarcastic sounding references are in this universe literal. Like when Scott is explaining his relationship with Kim. Okay, fine. I fought an 80-foot tall guy in a tracksuit that shot energy beams out of his eyes, and I punched him so high he saw the curvature of the earth. In the comics, that's actually happening. You know, it's just shown that way instead of, you know, related to. So I think they feed off each other very well. For me, although I really like graphic novels and comics a lot, and books in general, I think it's the magic of Edgar Wright that really makes the film shine more for me.
Well, that's what brought me into it, and so yeah, that works. I did want to go back to something I skipped over from the last topic. It's a quote from Guillermo del Toro about how this film fared at the box office. Guillermo del Toro said, and this is taken out of the context of a much bigger quote, when they ask, why does Hollywood make such movies? It's because when they do great ones, you don't fucking show up. And that is just so true. We're so, and you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with, you know, loving the movies you love, but we are so overloaded now with Marvel and DC and Fast and the Furious and Jurassic World and these big movies that are all expected to bring in hundreds of millions of dollars that we often miss out on or just skip over these other great films like the movies that Frank and I talked about last week, The Northman and Everything Everywhere All at Once, which are both great films that aren't going to be making huge amounts of money, but still highly recommend those. I think this falls into that same category. It got lost in the shuffle of much bigger films, some good, some awful. So, moving on. Who are your favorite characters, scenes, lines, or moments? Your favorite anything in Scott Pilgrim? Andrea, I want to ask you first because you're ready to laugh. I can see it.
When he jumps through the window when Knives is at the door. I think you both know what part I'm talking about. But he enters the door and Wallace says, he's not here. And Scott jumps through the window in the background. And that's probably my favorite scene in the whole movie.
Really? Yeah, sorry. You just missed him. Crash.
Because that's not even an exaggeration. That's probably what I would do to avoid an X as well. But my favorite character is probably Wallace. Trying to think of other characters. I mean, I like all the characters, even the evil ones, because they're just so defined. Yeah, I guess Wallace is probably my favorite. A lot of the lines are too good for me to pick a favorite line. I do like Knives' I'm Too Cool for You Anyway, and I remember what that one line was about the vegans with Todd Ingram being a vegan. Like that whole scene is like top tier.
Oh, the final. Are you talking about the final line or is any line? Because
Any line when he's talking about I'm a vegan. Anybody can be vegan. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Ovo-lacto vegetarian maybe. And then Brie Larson is like, yeah, he's better than you because he's vegan. And it's just they take it so seriously. That's what makes it so funny. And then of course the vegan police showing up, and it's
Yeah.
freaking Clifton Collins and the Punisher. I forgot his name.
and Thomas Jane.
Thomas Jane. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty great.
That's something I've been meaning to look up for the past decade, but I've never done it. Do you know if those guys are actually vegans? Is that the reason why they were cast, or just good
I don't
casting?
know.
I
Good
can look it up
question.
real quick.
But just be an added bonus, because that's almost what
I'm
you would
on it.
expect.
I'm on it, Sean. I got you.
While you're doing that, I can't pick a favorite character just because it's such a strong ensemble. Some of my favorite lines are actually just tossaways in the background. Like after the first show, was it young Neil saying, "Oh man, you should really see them live. They're much better live." Yeah. That's like, what?
Young Neil's the best.
Yeah. Or this is a switch from the book. In the beginning, when Knives asks young Neil, "So what do you play?" In the book, he just says, "I just live here." And in the movie, they were actually able to expand that. It's like, oh man, I like Zelda, Tetris. That's kind of a big question. You're putting a lot on me there. Yeah.
One of my favorite kind of throwaway lines is when Chris Evans gets the text, Lucas Lee gets the text, and he just looks down and is like, that's actually hilarious. It's like nothing to do with anything, but it's the line itself is amazing.
The way that some of the actors just made it work within moments. They're a limited time on screen, and it's a character that you could just have fun with over and over again. Both Lucas Lee and or the bass duel or something like that, I can just put on that scene and have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
They have such great energy, and the quirkiness really fits.
It's ridiculously hard to pick a favorite character because everyone, you said it's a strong ensemble and everyone gets to have great moments. Julie has the wonderful scene in the coffee house where she keeps swearing and her mouth keeps getting edited.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how that comes back later with Envy at the end of that scene.
Mm-hmm.
In the first Battle of the Band scene, I love right after Steven has flipped through the chart and Crash and the Boys start playing. Steven has that big long line, but you can't hear it, so they just put the dialogue on screen for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's another thing. It's like that's such a comic book thing to do. You just have the dialogue there for you to read.
Everybody has those lines. It's like they have a girl drummer.
And Kim only blinks 3 times in the entire movie. If you watch Kim, she's just going like this the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Allison Pill brought it.
Thomas Jane is not a vegan, and Clifton Collins Jr. was going vegan unintentionally during COVID, but he's not a vegan either.
Okay. If that's what stuck, if those are the remainders in your closet, and that's just what you have is canned beans, you're not a vegan. That's just survival.
And they've got one of my favorite moments in the movie too, is when they leave and they just high five.
We also have the "It's milk and eggs, bitch," which is another good line.
Chicken isn't vegan. But with that high five, that's also a moment that sticks out. It's like, is that scripted? Did they plan that? Was that just an impromptu thing? It's like, hey, when we jump out, let's just high five midair.
Yeah. That's actually part of my favorite chunk of the movie. My favorite chunk of the movie is everything starting from when Brie Larson walks on stage and sings Black Sheep all the way through to the end of Roxy's fight. I think is my favorite chunk of film because it's just moving at the perfect pace. And during the song, I love how Edgar Wright is doing the split screen, cutting back and forth between, the 4 different lovers during the song. And it's again, just Edgar Wright at the top of his game. And it's my favorite song in the movie too. I think it's just a fun song.
It's a metric song, and I actually prefer Brie Larson's singing it. It's a good song.
I've only heard Brie Larson singing it, so
If you have watched the outtakes, there's a scene when she falls flat on her face during that song.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the outtakes in this, of course, are also amazing because why wouldn't they be with this cast? This is just, yeah, it's just everything about this movie is just joyful to me. And I want to go back to an Edgar Wright technique here for the next question, because I think this is something that he does very well in all of his films. How effectively does this film use foreshadowing as a tool for storytelling? Sean, I'm going to jump to you first on this one.
I think of foreshadowing a little bit differently, where some things were pure foreshadowing, like Scott and Knives doing that video game and developing their fight choreography and seeing how they blend well together. And of course, that brings up Nega Scott. There are other things which I don't know if I'd call foreshadowing so much as just they are lined up and they feed in so well, but not a direct foreshadowing. It's just the ingredients are placed there for you. I may be splitting hairs there, but those are just my reflections on it, where things feed into one another so well, but it's not like it's the whole thing is put there in a microcosm with the expectation that you'll be able to bring it out. You could also go back to the X's on the phone number, of course. That's really solid. But just or it might be my problem just because there are so little touches in this movie that reward repeat viewing, like them being in the Goodwill and he's sitting on a couch with a sign on it that says "Do not sit." It was so many things that I only picked up the third time I watched the movie. So.
Andrea, what's your take on foreshadowing in this film?
The biggest one for me was all the X's everywhere, like not just the phone number, but like when Scott's walking around, there's like X's everywhere. Always somewhere it's not really foreshadowing, but always somewhere in the battle or right before the battle, they have the number of the X shown somewhere. Yep. Like Lucas Lee has like a 2 tattoo right here, and like they go into Club 4 when they fight Roxy. So it's just like, that's not really foreshadowing, but that's kind of like, oh, this is going to happen here and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And of course, the ever so dramatic 3 on Todd Ingram's shirt. But there's another thing that I actually didn't notice until I actually read about it. And it was every time Ramona goes like this, you hear the little ding sonic noise or whatever it was because of the chip that Gideon put in her. Or every time you just hear like a little beep or whatever. And I didn't notice that until I read about it. And now that I watched it and that happened, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Every time they talk about how she has a boyfriend in New York, there's some sort of like lighting cue. It's just like little things like that. But it's just, yeah, I mean, the regular Edgar Wright stuff. Mm-hmm. And yeah, just, now I'm like scratching my neck, but not intentionally. Yeah, I mean, the X thing is obvious, and the fact that he kept saying ex-boyfriends and she says exes because they're not all boys. You know, I mean, those are the obvious ones. And yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff it's either very subtle or not subtle at all, in my opinion. But I think that's Edgar Wright's thing.
My favorite uses, and I think this may not strictly fall under foreshadowing, but I love that everywhere in the world there's a poster of a Lucas Lee film, like on the sides of the buses, or in like all the newspaper ads have a Lucas Lee thing going on in it. There's the Envy Adams like retail displays in the music store. And I didn't know this one until I read it either, but apparently every time they like pick up a Clash of Demon Head album in the music store, or you see like a close shot of Envy, if you listen carefully, the alarm in the music store goes off. It's like, that's a nice little touch. What was the other one? But I just love the Envy one in particular because you see all of those retail displays, and then when she finally appears in a scene with all of our main characters, it's standing in front of one of them, making that pose. And that's, again, that's just a brilliant sort of Edgar Wright trick.
Mhm.
But I love it. I love how that goes.
Kind of along those lines, when he gets that call from Envy and it kind of like pans around him a little bit in the background, you'll see either you could label them inserts or posters that weren't there before. And they're kind of like from a photo booth with Envy and Scott. And it shows the pattern of their relationship. So it starts with them smiling, and then the final strip is her leaving and him kind of going, "What just happened?" So not foreshadowing, but just that symbolism. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, the visual storytelling in this film is just some of my favorite. Speaking of which, that leads me right into the next question. How does this film expand upon the techniques Edgar Wright employs in his previous films? Sean, I'll go to you first.
I think the source material really freed him up because he had already developed certain techniques. He was really good at wipes and transitions and stuff like that. And also, he's very good at clearly presenting things in even a fast-paced environment. He doesn't rely on shakiness. Things are in the frame. So with the addition of it being based on a comic and him just going full tilt with that, you have the onomatopoeia and the framing of comics within it and them adding to those transitions, which I think he may have gotten there anyway in his career just because he's such an artistic technician. But this, I would argue, inspired him, which brings to mind the news that is irrelevant nowadays. But back in the day, after this movie came out, we heard that he was going to do Marvel's Ant-Man. And I don't know why that fell through. I don't know if his vision was not cohesive with the studios because they had, the Gauntlet, Infinity Saga to focus on, or this was during the time that they had certain Marvel creative people from the past, from the comics, giving too much input into things. But man, Ant-Man isn't one of my favorite characters, but I was so looking forward to that possibility because he was directing it. And we're never going to have that. I think also, where was I going? The way, including the attention to detail and things in the background. Almost you can see frame by frame in this movie the names of the clubs or the restaurants from the book in the movie, and a lot of the sounds reflecting from one scene to the next, just adding to that transition. Just again, the attention to detail and the care and the inspiration that he put into this movie upset me that most people didn't see it, that I think would have adored it. And also the attention to given to some of his other stuff, like I'm not knocking Baby Driver, but it's no Scott Pilgrim versus the World, but that made more money. And I think more people got to know him from that, maybe, which is one of those things that is just tragic, but in a way we can be the cool kids who knew the band before they got big.
Yeah, I do love that he decided to actually film in Toronto and use as many locations as he possibly could. I think that does lend a greater sense of authenticity to the film. And I love the gag where, they're showing the stuff with Lucas Lee and they tear away the New York City skyline because, of course, everyone goes to Toronto to film stuff that takes place in New York or Chicago or whatever. Andrea, what do you think about how Edgar Wright expanded his skill, his craft during this film?
Well, I pretty much agree with everything Sean said, but I think that he had I think this type of movie is his comfort zone. Like, he's got a great source material to work with, and already in the books, like, it has already Edgar Wright style in the books. Like, it'll have like him looking straight on with a thought bubble, and the next one is him going just like they do in the movie, in the very like jump cutty Edgar Wright style and all that stuff. And to this day, I am still very, very upset that it was not even nominated for a visual effects Oscar, but doesn't have anything to do with Edgar Wright, but it's just something that I needed to say. And I'm very disappointed because the visual effects were incredible in this movie. And just the thought, I think he was able to have a lot of freedom. And I read somewhere that this is his first American film, and he wanted to not have any British actors in it. They're all American or Canadian, except for one. Satya Baba is British, but he didn't know that when he cast it, because he did such a good American accent that he was like, "Oh, Don, you tricked me! How dare you!" But yeah. Anyway, I don't really have anything else to add because Sean already said most of it, and I think we talked about Edgar Wright earlier in the episode too. So it's just kind of just being in his comfort zone, and the fact that he has so much freedom to work with, and he probably read the comics and was like, "This is perfect. I want to direct this movie." So like, it's a good fit for him. And again, with Baby Driver, it's also Edgar Wright, but it feels less Edgar Wright than the previous Edgar Wright movies. And I think, like, I don't know, maybe because it's American, but so was this movie. So I don't know. But I think he's a perfect director for a movie like this.
You mentioned the awards, and this is one of those darlings of a movie, or a creative outlet, whatever, that you experience and you just expect the accolades to come. And it's perfectly justifiable to get angry that nobody else is recognizing it, whether it be the popularity in the box office or even the Academy Awards. How are you not supposed to recognize everything that's going into this, whether it be like set design or special effects, etc.?
Do I think it's a Best Picture worthy movie? Absolutely not. But the visual effects are stunning. Like something like Avatar winning, but this one doesn't. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about Avatar. That's not what we're talking about. But anyway. But like,
Avatar reminded me that James Cameron is an excellent director. Nobody ever really thought much of him as a writer. But, hey.
Just to go off on a tangent, I also have my beef with Avatar because Avatar was the big sci-fi darling at the Academy Awards the same year that District 9 was also nominated for Best Picture and like a lot of the same categories. And I'm just sitting here like, yeah, District 9. What a great story. What a great screenplay. What great acting. Nothing.
Isn't it the same plot as Avatar?
District 9?
Yeah.
No.
An outsider joins a new world and then sees the way that they treat the outsiders and decides, hey, maybe they were wrong to treat him like that. Same as Pocahontas.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess, but better.
Pocahontas, Dances with Wolves, Avatar, all the same story. Fern Gully.
District 9, Scott Pilgrim, both better than Avatar. You heard it here.
I agree.
Bold take.
Look, if you like Avatar, that's great, and I'm of the opinion that it's so weird since the trailer for Avatar 2 debuted. There's been this discussion on social media of, Avatar isn't culturally relevant, and it's like, oh well, it netted this many views in the first day. Of course, it's culturally relevant. And I think my take on it is, yeah, people are excited about it, but I don't think it has the same kind of cultural impact that a lot of people think it does, because in the 10, 12, whatever many years it's been since Avatar, like, how many different lines of action figures have they released? Like, every time that Kenner is like, new Star Wars figures, it's like, new Star Wars figures, of course. But I just don't think Avatar has reached like that.
Well, Avatar has a whole entire world in Disney's Animal Kingdom. at Disney
Well,
World.
doesn't Star Wars have a whole galaxy in Disney now?
Yeah, but Avatar does too.
Star Wars is more realistic, though.
It's a different story
Anyway.
than Avatar.
Anyway, Scott Pilgrim. So we were talking about the techniques of Edgar Wright. Oh yeah, the only thing I was going to bring up that hasn't been mentioned yet is since his previous two films are sort of grounded in the sort of standard rules of cinema. One thing I think he got to experiment with in this film is there are moments where the aspect ratio changes, whether it be in Scott's dreams or the moment where one of the X's just shows up out of the blue, and all of a sudden we go from a 1.85 to closer to a 2.35 aspect ratio. And in the dreams, it's really fun because it cuts to that ratio, and then as he's coming out of the dream, it slowly goes back to the 1.85. So I love how he uses the aspect ratio to tell the stories as well.
Was that Roxy's introduction that they did that for?
I think they do it for. I think they do it for Roxy's, and I think they do it during. There's several points they do it. The other part I think they do it in is the Amp versus Amp fight with the Katyanaga twins. Mm-hmm. Which again, that's also one of my favorite moments in the film because I love kaiju.
The energy of that scene is just off the charts. I don't know how you can't not get an upwelling of it. That's not a totally inspirational story, but just fun energy.
That's also very different from the books, just FYI.
Yeah.
Scenes like that actually make me wish I had a better sound setup because I've just got my TV. I don't have, anything special going on, but at least on the 4K version, like the audio mix is, feels normal when everyone's talking. And then for every song or action scene, they dial it up to 11. And the sound is insane. I do love that. Kind of going off of that last question, how does this film play by its own rules? And how does it distinguish itself from other comic book adaptations? Sean, you kind of touched on that already with how other comic book adaptations are just adaptations. They don't adhere to, the look of a comic book.
There was one exception to that came to mind for me, and that was the original modern Hulk movie with Eric Bana. It was directed by Ang Lee, a director that's renowned, and it kind of came across as an experiment because he had fun with the comic framing on the screen, but it was just flat. It didn't have appropriate transitions, and it may have been a technical issue, but it wasn't justified, and it didn't quite pull it off that way. But they tried on that one, but it didn't have the technique that Edgar Wright brings with the animation feeding into the transitions and stuff like that, with the sound effects and the almost watermark lightning, energy bolts coming off some frames and scenes, where I think it was more palatable with Wright.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd forgotten actually about Ang Lee's Hulk because it's kind of forgettable, unfortunately. So yeah, Andrea, what would you say about this movie sort of taking on its own rules?
Well, you said it at the very beginning when you were just reading the plot off of IMDb, and it said in a magical version of Toronto, which is the perfect way to describe where it takes place, in my opinion. It's basically like if Toronto were a comic book. And I've never been to Toronto, but I don't know what Toronto's actually like, but I don't think it's like that. But just the fact that, like, what would it be like if people were living in a comic book, not in an MCU world where there's superheroes everywhere, a DC world where there's superheroes, but like literally you open up a book and there's people like walking around inside of it. Like that's what I feel like this would be. It's a comic book version of Toronto. And I think that that's what this film portrays. And I think it portrays it really, really well. Because all the fighting happens, and I mean, people are watching it, but nobody except for Anna Kendrick, I guess, is kind of like, what's going on? So it's just kind of like, oh, this happens. This is normal Toronto stuff that happens in our world. Who knows? So I think that the fact that they let it be magical and let it be comic book style, they can get away with a lot more stuff. And I think that it works really well here.
He does maintain a great atmosphere throughout the movie for this magical Toronto. That's one of the consistencies. I mean, there are outlandish things going on, but the emotions are always honest, and the setting remains true throughout.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that that this film does take place in the magical version of Toronto, and it's not concerned with the greater world at large. Who cares if outside of Toronto this kind of stuff doesn't happen? The only thing that's important is what goes on in the movie. The only thing that's important are these characters. So I appreciate that it's not concerned with, telling a story about the greater world. So going off of comic books and transitioning into another medium, is Scott Pilgrim the best video game movie? Andrea, what do you think?
I haven't seen any video game movies because I've heard they're all terrible. So I'm going to say yes. I think this one would also translate the best into a video game. I know it is been transformed. I think it was an 8-bit video game. Like it's like an NES version or something like that. I'm not familiar with it, but I know it is a video game. But this movie does a very good job at being a video game, and it makes it very easy to transfer it into video game format. And based on what I know about the Assassin's Creed movie, yes, this is the best video game. And the
Sean, what would you say to that?
I cannot agree that it is a video game movie. For me, it is a live action comic cartoon, basically. And it's lovely for that. The biggest compliment regarding video games I can give it is it's not only inspirational, but I was never even a serious gamer as a kid, but I loved the details in the movie taken from video games, whether it be the decreasing P bar when he uses the restroom, just those little touches that were just magical. Him getting a life, those things feeding into it were great. So if you are of the mindset that it doesn't have to be lifted directly from a video game, but at least it's has some great touches from it, this is still one of the best movies in my opinion. So sure, I'll nominate in several categories and see where it sticks.
I'm probably the one with the most experience with video game movies in this panel. And the reason I just call this a video game movie, it's not adapting any one specific game story. Obviously, it's adapting a series of graphic novels, but there are so many great homages to some of the greatest video games of all time. And the fight scenes do feel like a fighting game come to life. If you want to look at it as Street Fighter, or maybe the final fight with Gideon is,
they
takes
literally
more
have
from
their health bars, like
yeah.
Yep.
on their side, yeah.
Gideon's fight, it's a weapons fight, so there's Soul Calibur right there. And yes, there actually is a Scott Pilgrim versus the World video game. It came out, it was either right before or right after the movie on PlayStation 3, and then unfortunately it was delisted because they lost the rights to a lot of the music they used in the game. And so for years you couldn't get it, which is why when they re-released it, I bought a physical copy so that I would not lose it again. But yeah, and it's just a brawler. It's a classic like Streets of Rage type brawler. So perfect type of game to go along with what the story is. But yeah, like video. Go ahead, Sean.
Well, how I referenced Star Wars having so many great ingredients going into it You have magic with laser guns and Western, themes to it. This one has the energy of a garage rock band with a fighting video game with Edgar Wright's style and comic books. I mean, and it blends well. It's not a failure. It makes that recipe work. So, sure.
Well, and the thing about video game adaptations in film is that they're not trying to be video games. They're trying to be films. They're going the logical route. Whether or not they adapt the story, from the game, they're just trying to get the feel of it right. But they're still just movies. When characters die in the Resident Evil movie, the camera doesn't pan up and go, "You are dead." They just die like you do in a movie. The Mortal Kombat films, I haven't seen them, but from what I've seen, they don't have health bars.
I'll admit, I have a soft spot for the 1990s original Mortal Kombat. I'm not saying it's a great movie. It has a fun element to it. Yeah.
And to Andrea's point, they usually are pretty bad. I have yet to see a game that's adapted or a movie that's adapted directly from a game that I would put in the pantheon of great films. So for me, this is one that, yes, it's adapted from a comic book. It feels like a comic book come to life, but at times it also feels like a video game come to life. And so for me, it is the greatest video game movie. And also, I have to, of course, mention the 8-bit Universal logo to kick off the film, which is the greatest use of a logo opening a film of all time.
With the 8-bit music accompanying it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then just because they can, they stuck in the proper Universal logo music when Chris Evans emerges from the trailer, which is the best use of that music ever.
Boom, boom.
Yep. All right. So I think there's a very, very easy answer to the first part of this question. Does Scott Pilgrim hold up today? Are there any films released recently, say within the last, 5 so years, that can compare it in terms of how the story is told? Andrea, does Scott Pilgrim hold up?
Yeah. I mean, characters wise, I think this is gonna be me gatekeeping some stuff, but I think it's a little cishet. But that's how it was written at the time, and at the time it was fine. The only gay character is Wallace and Roxy, who's bi. But I mean, I don't care about that. And at the time it was fine. It doesn't affect the plot at all. But if it were to come out today, I would want more races as well, since there's only 3 non-white characters in the whole movie. But four, excuse me. But at the time it's fine, and I still think it's fine, and it doesn't. Besides that stuff, yes, based on like plot, action, visual effects, story, characters, yeah, I think it does hold up. Sorry, I'm moving so much.
It's all good.
I think in the comics, doesn't Stephen Stills hook up with a guy at the end?
He might. It's been a while since I've read the books, but if you're going by just a movie perspective.
Yeah. I mean, Wallace hooks up with many paramours, but, Then again, I think in the comics, there was a lot more interchanging, with relationships bouncing back and forth just because they could do more.
Yeah. Toronto is the New York of Canada, so I know there's a little bit more diversity, but again, in this world of Toronto, who knows?
Sean, does it hold up for you, Sean?
I don't want to undersell or oversell, but just as Ridley Scott's works of the 1970s and 80s, such as Alien and Blade Runner, are still magnificent and stand up today, I think the style of it helps, but I think this is going to look as good on a big screen or a little screen 20 years from now as it does now. There are elements of it that culturally might be iffy, that has been referenced here, or some of the terminology they use that didn't raise an eyebrow 12 years ago may raise an eyebrow now. But as far as the film goes, I think it's going to be evergreen.
Well said, because it's what I said too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with all of that. This is a movie I watch at least once a year, and I watched it twice in the last week. So, and it's 12 years later. In the
I
last
haven't
few
gotten
years,
tired of it. I
yeah,
have a limited tolerance for watching movies over and over again. This is one of those classics that I can put in and not be disappointed.
And what's funny to me is I think all the I was gonna say almost all, but all the actors look the same. Like they haven't aged very much since the movie came out.
yeah, especially Michael Cera.
Yeah.
They're all drinking Ewan McGregor juice.
Yeah.
I would say if I could pick, I picked two films that I would compare to. I'd say Into the Spider-Verse is a comparable film in that it feels like it may not be live action, but it is a comic book film given life and just doesn't care about the rules that every other comic book movie had set forth. It has several different animation styles for all the different spider people who show up. And I love that it does that. And, it does, the classic sort of smack, jab kind of thing in its action scene. So I think that is a comic book movie that does some similar things, not quite as inventive in terms of just like the character relationships and some of the weird editing that Edgar Wright can do, but still a very different film from what we've come to expect from most comic book films. And then again, I'm going to plug this film again, Everything Everywhere All at Once, a multiverse film that, because it's not beholden to the 20 Marvel films that came before it, can just be like, here's what the multiverse is, and we don't care that it's absolutely ridiculous and that these are the rules, and is just an insane bit of filmmaking that tells a beautiful family drama that is just told through the lens of an insane multiverse world with hot dog hands and all kinds of weird stuff. And then, of course, I'd also want to throw in from television, Community is a TV show that I would lump in there as a show that comparably doesn't care about the rules of television, is ludicrously self-aware that it is a TV program, and does stuff like Abed's Uncontrollable Christmas, an entire episode that is a stop motion homage to Rankin Bass holiday features, or an episode like they do an entire Law and Order episode with the Law and Order music, and it's incredible and stuff like that. And that's a show that doesn't care about, doesn't care about playing it straightforward.
Lupine Urology, I think was the title of that episode for Dick Wolf, the Law and Order producer. Yeah. One of my all-time favorite shows. And one of the things that you could also make a comparison for is they are outrageous, outlandish, but the emotions are honest. They don't dismiss what people are going through.
Yeah, Community really gets you in the feels. Final big question. Where would you rank this film among the filmography of Edgar Wright? Just the stuff that you've seen, obviously, because I'm sure that I'm the only one here who's seen Last Night in Soho. Well, Sean, you already answered. Andrea, what would you say?
It's in my top 3. I love Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz so much. This is, even though it's Edgar Wright's style, it's still a completely different movie from the other two. Not that the other two are the same movie, but it's the same exact formula. But this is a different movie, so it's hard to like compare it. Even though, I mean, you know what I'm saying. But so, in terms, I mean, it's probably my favorite movie of all time. One of my favorite movies of all time. So I'll just say one because it's probably one of my favorite movies of all time. But I still have a soft spot for the original Cornetto trilogy, so still got a spot in my heart.
Before Ben goes, can you tell us, you mentioned Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead that are really popular. Not as many people talk about The World's End.
You did a whole episode on all the Cornetto
We
trilogy.
did.
Yeah.
I was that one too.
Do you put that as high as the other two, or like a rung below? Or are you saying, Sean, you have to go check out the video?
I say, Sean, you have to watch a video, but he's
All
asking.
right. I'm a member of the public. I can't force these things.
It's been a while since I've seen World's End. It's been the other two are fresh in my mind. I watched Hot Fuzz the other day and saw Shaun of the Dead like a week ago, but it's been a while since I've seen World's End, so I can't really give an honest opinion. But that one also came out after Scott Pilgrim, so that's a topic for another day.
This is tough. I want to say first, just because it is sort of, the Cornetto trilogy, as you said, Andrea, they're thematically and stylistically the same across the board. Even though I think The World's End might be my favorite screenplay of Wright's, that original screenplay, but this one is just, it's so unique just among film in general, that, like I said, I watch it at least once a year. World's End is great, but World's End is also a little more depressing. This is a lot easier to sit through on a rainy day. And definitely, just on a tangent, I would definitely, I'm gonna be that guy who says, yeah, Baby Driver is his weakest film. And Last Night in Soho is above that, but I do love it because it's a horror film, a proper horror film, not a comedy horror film. But yeah, I'd probably say this one's my favorite.
I do want to add that scene in Ant-Man where Michael Peña's character is talking and they're telling that story and everybody's talking over him is very Edgar Wright. So I think that's something that they kept from his original screenplay, because
I could dig that.
Scene is very Edgar Wright.
I read that I think it was on IMDb. Edgar Wright didn't write that part.
Well,
but they wrote it. They wrote it as an homage to his work.
Yeah, it's very Edgar Wright, that whole scene there.
Sean, keeping on this tangent, from what I gathered in my research of Ant-Man, because I had to do a little research about directors leaving Marvel for the Doctor Strange episode, it just sounds like Edgar Wright really wanted to make Ant-Man like its own standalone film, that really didn't tie into the MCU. And by the time he got around to it, because he'd been attached to Ant-Man since 2004, before they, had gotten the idea that this was going to be a big shared universe. And it took him he was working on so many other movies in between that by the time he finally got to it, of course, Ant-Man had to be a part of the bigger picture. So I think that was the biggest disagreement that led to Edgar Wright leaving. But he still has a screenwriting credit and he still has an executive producer credit. So it's not like he left on the worst terms with Marvel. But it is, and I do like what Peyton Reed brought. I think Ant-Man is a very enjoyable film, and the rewrites that Paul Rudd and Adam McKay brought to it made it a great little family film. But it is kind of like, what if, using that Marvel terminology, what if?
Yeah.
All right, it's time to start wrapping things up here. So, Sean, what are your final thoughts for us on Scott Pilgrim versus the World?
Recommend. It's just a fun movie. And like I said, has the energy of a garage rock band with video game, combat with Edgar Wright's magic touch. It's just a lovely combination of things coming together and stuff. Like you said earlier, they don't come around that often. Even if you have the great cast or great source material or great director, the chances of things coming together just right is just really difficult, even with all the best intentions. And this movie pulls it off.
Andrea, what are your final thoughts?
I also recommend. Fun fact, though, I dressed up as Roxy Richter for Halloween when the movie first came out. I went to Emerald City Comic Con as Roxy Richter, and I actually took a picture with a girl who was dressed as Ramona, and so it was like, I think it was Comic Con 2010, maybe, or 2011, because Comic Con's before. Anyway, and only a year after it came out, there was like no Scott Pilgrim characters there. So it was just at a place like Comic-Con, like, that's the ultimate geek paradise. No offense, I don't think geek's a bad term. So if you do, I apologize, but I don't think it is. But it's like the ultimate like geek nerd paradise, and Scott Pilgrim is that kind of film. To not have anybody dress. There were like 3 or 4 of us there that I saw, and I went all 3 days, and it was just, I don't know. It's kind of like there's no one and I'm like, you guys should love this stuff. So I feel like it's very underappreciated, and I'm glad it does have somewhat of a cult following now. They did that reunion YouTube thing, which Ben, you should watch, and it's so unique. It's such a unique movie. I can't even think of a single movie that's like it. I can think of movies that try to be like it, but there really isn't anything like it, and it's a fun movie, and I think everyone should see it. And sorry, I went on a tangent again, but recommend. 5 out of 5. Very good.
Final thought. First scene of the movie, I'm thinking, did he say her name is Knives? What? All right, let's see where this goes.
Yeah, if you're watching this, I assume that you are, like us, just celebrating this film along with us. And if you have seen this film and you love it, great. Share it with people. Ask around. Have you seen this movie? This 12-year-old gem of a film? No? Sit down. We're watching it now.
It was streaming on Netflix, and I think now it's on Hulu. So it should be streaming somewhere.
Hopefully, I hope it's streaming somewhere. And if you are just someone who has been curious about this movie and you've watched us to just jabbering on about it, then yeah, if you're curious, go watch it. If you like Edgar Wright, watch it. If you like Michael Cera, if you like anyone in that cast, you should watch it, because again, even the actors who have smaller parts, Aubrey Plaza just stands out and has some great moments. Mm-hmm. Just watch this movie, share this movie. It's brilliant. And like Sean said, this kind of movie doesn't come around often. And I'm just going to plug it again. If you liked this movie, go see Everything Everywhere All at Once, because I think that's the next film that came around. So yeah. And so that brings us to trivia. And let me bring up the scores here. Andrea, you are at 1 point right now.
Oh, that's more than I thought I had. Okay.
I'm still at 0. You're doing
good. Sean, this is your
Oh.
chance to get on the board.
That's right.
Current leaders are Jalen and Travis are at 5 apiece.
Oh gosh.
So,
Of course,
that's well. It helped that Travis really wanted to go on the big, long 5-episode Godzilla adventure with me. So, So, this week's trivia. Edgar Wright has stated that Scott Pilgrim was filmed with which genre in mind? A, martial arts, B, anime, C, musical, or D, Western? Do either of you know it for sure?
I'm
think I do.
confident that it's one, that it's, if I can answer.
Go ahead.
I'm going to say anime.
I'm gonna say C, musical.
I'm going to say definitely not C, musical. Final answer. No.
Well, one of you is correct. Andrea, you've doubled your score.
Yep, I remember reading an interview. He's wanted each of the fight scenes to be like a musical number.
Yeah, he said something to the effect of, it's like a musical, except, yeah, whenever it gets that breaking point where you normally break into song, instead, we break into a fight. So there we
I
go.
was like, I'm pretty sure I know it.
So congratulations to Andrea.
Yay.
Sean, if you're back, we'll get you on the board soon. That has been the Sunday Matinee episode 47, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, 10th, scratched out, 12th anniversary special. So thank you to Sean. Thank you to Andrea. We do not have an episode next week. I'm going to be busy with life and not be in this state. So come back 2 weeks from now, and we'll be talking about Stranger Things Season 4, Part 1, since they decided to break it up this time. So thank you, everyone, for watching. Have fun out there at the movies. Have a good day.